keep dancing with the devil. One day he's gonna follow you home.
Good morning, Vietnam! I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I feel the need for speed.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to what is sure to be a fantastic episode of the Moviescramble podcast. Joining me today is a man so handsome you'd wish Ryan Coogler had made two of him. It's John.
Very good. These intros are getting better and better and more complimentary with every week.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good, yes. I've already used the fantastic line.
I know, which is why
when we were
exactly I lifted it. Yeah.
promoting one of the previous podcasts.
Yeah.
I don't know if you actually saw it, because you know how when we post them from Podbean, there's the wee blurb. I put a wee bit of blurb in there saying, you know, this is what we're talking about. And then there's everything like where you can find us and the various things and our Spotify playlist. If anybody's listening, we do Spotify playlists for each episode and sometimes for the deleted scenes as well, just kind of a nice wee tie-in. But in the one for, I'm trying to think what it was for. It was for Nosferatu. I put our fantastic films that we were covering, and then I put on it, I'm not even sorry I wrote this.
No, vampire puns are the best. So
definitely, yeah. Anyway, yes, I'm good. I'm having a nice weekend, and I'm really sort of buzzing to talk about this film, which will be good. How are you doing?
Really well, enjoying the sunshine, and just looking forward to. I feel like I could talk about this film all day, not least because I have listened to the soundtrack pretty much every day since I went to see it at the cinema. And the film, of course, that we're talking about is Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is out in cinemas now and will probably continue to be in cinemas for a few weeks more if it keeps up its excellent run at the box office.
We've been gone a long time. We back now. You twins? Nah, we cousins.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true. It can conjure spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring fame and fortune.
Well, somebody take me in your eyes.
But it also can pierce the veil between life and death.
It's a sort of supernatural horror with music at its core. Michael B. Jordan plays both Elias and Elijah Moore, who are primarily known as the Smokestack Twins. And these are two brothers who've come home to the South, having spent time working for Al Capone in Chicago. With a bag of cash, they acquire an old mill and decide to open their own juke joint. And their little cousin Sammy, played by Miles Caton, is an accomplished blues guitarist and singer who can provide the entertainment. But when Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, asks to be let into their club, all hell breaks loose, quite literally. So, what were your sort of first impressions or expectations going into Sinners, sort of based on Ryan Coogler's previous work?
He has a very sort of mixed bag in terms of what his output is, and I don't mean that in terms of how good it is. It's all been good, but he tends to jump about. He's done a few things. Obviously, he's entered the superhero market and everything as well. So I had reasonably high expectations based on that and the fact that Michael B. Jordan is obviously front and centre and slightly to the left as well. So I only saw a trailer for it just before it. I think it was maybe about 4 or 5 days before it came out. And I was kind of blown away by it. I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. It just looks brilliant. My initial impressions after seeing it was it met the remit. It met the sort of standards that I had sort of set in my mind. I'm sure Mr. Coogler's very happy that my expectations were met. Yeah. Middle-aged white guy, brilliant. That's the kind of market we're looking for. So yes, I was very, very impressed by the film, and obviously we'll go into a wee bit more detail about that. Now, you I think you've been kind of looking forward to this
I've
film
been
as well.
raving about this. Yeah, do you know what? I really wish trailer 2 hadn't happened for this film, because I feel like it gives away so much more of the film than what the first trailer did. But for me, you got a glimpse of Michael B. Jordan playing twins. It was like all my Christmases had come at once. And you got like a teaser of Remick. And that was enough. I just knew that I was going to be hooked by this. I really like Ryan Coogler's work. In Fruitvale Station, for example, I can cite as being like a piece of cinema that I was really drawn to, like emotionally. I felt like I had a really strong response to that. Obviously, I think I've seen the first Black Panther. I haven't seen the second one, so I can't comment on that. But obviously, he has sort of entered a different universe, as it were, with that type of career. But I think that he continues to make really interesting choices. And obviously, this film, he had said, was sort of based off stories that his grandfather, I think it was, had told him about musicians in the South. And so that kind of piqued my interest as well. But yes, I had been wanting to see this for a very long time, and I still maintain that it's top 10 of the year material already. So I thought it'd be worth sort of breaking the film down into like kind of like chunks to talk about, because there's so much to talk about in terms of like themes and whatever. So I figured we'd start with performance. So obviously we've got Michael B. Jordan playing Smoke and Stack. What did you think of that? Because to me, it definitely didn't feel gimmicky.
No, it depends. The success of these type of endeavours depends on the actor themselves.
Yeah.
If they can pull it off, if they are able to pull out two different performances, therefore separating the two twins, but at the same time having certain characteristics that cross over between them. And that's kind of a fine line, because if you do it wrong, you just get two characters that are pretty much the same. And if you do it incorrectly, then there's not that connection between them that you would expect between twins, because obviously they've spent their whole life together and they've obviously experienced everything together. He does it really, really well. I think it's a fantastic performance, and it's very, very cleverly done. Down to the point where, I think it's Stack, he smokes, but he doesn't roll his own cigarettes.
Yeah.
Down to that, just these wee kind of touches that makes the brothers, the bond between the brothers really strong, and therefore the characterization is really strong, and that comes out like almost from the sort of the first scene. Well, not the first scene, obviously, because they're not involved now, but when they're introduced into the screen, you're thinking, yep, I know who these guys are. I know they have a past. I know they are very, very close. They are almost one person, but there's slight differences between them, and it works really well.
Yeah, I definitely think I like the fact that their tailoring was really similar, but you've got Smoke finished with a sort of flat cap, sort of Baker Boy hat, and then Stack obviously has the big sort of red kind of fedora type of hat. They've both got the gold caps on their teeth, but on different sides of their mouth, and they have slightly different like sort of haircuts as well. So I really like the fact that there was a sort of duality there, but then they were kind of separated out into different characters just by these sort of finishing touches. And I definitely think that there are scenes in the film that we'll come on to talk about where you really see the difference in personalities of the brothers sort of come to the fore. Like Smoke seems to be really, there's like a violence brimming there, I think, from the offset. We learn quite quickly that the brothers obviously escaped a violent childhood. Their father was abusive. And we also understand that they've served in World War One and have come back to find that, guess what, the country still treats you like shit, despite the fact that you were willing to put your life on the line. So I feel like there's a violence kind of brimming there that we don't necessarily see with Stack. He just wants to obviously make money and have a good time. And I think those little moments are really important for the fate of the characters as we move into the sort of the bigger parts of the film, as we get to understand that actually one of them is maybe a slightly softer touch than the other.
Yes.
Although having said that, when we meet them, like, when they think that their like booze truck is being hijacked and they just like kneecap somebody in the street, and it's like, oh shit, sorry, like didn't know that was you, sort of thing. Because even though they've been away for a long time, their reputation of how they sort of run the town, as it were, definitely precedes them. So I really like that.
It definitely does, yeah.
And of course we have Miles Caton, who makes his debut, which feels unbelievable because his performance is so good. I mean, his speaking voice is like velvet. And then that scene where he starts singing Traveling in the car, and Michael B. Jordan's surprised reaction seems really genuine because you cannot believe this voice comes out of this young man. Like, what did you think of his performance? Because I think that obviously Sammy's quite an integral character because he's the first person we see on screen, sort of on the run, sort of badly beaten. Like, how did you see him sort of throughout the whole of the film, and of course his musical performances as well?
Yeah, he's the one that has the biggest journey in the film. He goes from being the almost naive son of the preacher boy, he's called.
Preacher boy, yep.
Quite affectionately. And he actually quite likes that because it gives him a sort of duality between the fact that he is the son of a preacher. He's obviously been involved in the church his whole life, but he's trying to break away from that as well. It seems like kind of an apt title for a blues man, almost, you know, getting called preacher boy. Obviously, once you turn 35, you know, you really don't want to be called boy anymore, let's face it. But yes, so yeah, he had the film was kind of centered around him. I know Michael B. Jordan is the big star, but in terms of the story, it was all about him. Because like you say, very first scene he was in it, and then it flashes back to one day before, and it introduces him as a very, very different character to the one that we see, who has went through. Well, we'll talk about what he's actually going through. So yeah, I thought he was immense, and like you, when he started playing, that did look as if it was. I know obviously Michael B. Jordan is a very, very good actor, but that looked like a totally what the actual fuck moment, because it was kind of but you know, it was so genuine, and I actually laughed out loud when that happened, because I just thought that was just brilliant. It's one of these moments that you sometimes get in films where somebody, you know, like, you know, goes up on stage and sings for the first time or whatever, you know, or they open their voice, or they do something that is very unexpected, and they get a sort of shocked reaction. But obviously, it was a very small scale. It's just two people sitting in a car with him, and then he just launches into the song and starts. It's not so much when he starts playing, and he just sort of,
which in itself is skillful, he
does a wee strum to begin with, and you go, I wonder how this is going to go, and then he actually starts playing, and you think that's really good, and you can see that Stack is going, yeah, not bad, and then when the vocal actually comes in, it's just amazing. It was so good that they actually featured it later on in the film as well. They sort of went back to it just as a wee sort of ending bit, but I thought his performance was brilliant in this. Again, I had obviously never seen him in anything else, because it's an introducing credit, but that can mean he obviously has done other like TV stuff or whatever, or stage stuff. But yeah, it's a very good calling card for him, let's face it.
Yeah, and I really liked how endearing he was as a character. Like, he obviously idolizes Smoke and Stack and thinks of them as really sort of like worldly, because they've obviously lived in Chicago and they've been out, and he as a character is sort of aiming to kind of replicate their journey. Like, he wants to go out in the big city and sort of not be known as the preacher's son. He wants to go and do kind of what they do, but you get the sense that there's like a naivety there, and that Smoke and Stack, having had obviously a far more turbulent upbringing, are more equipped for the mean streets of Chicago, and obviously they've worked for Al Capone, whereas Sammy just doesn't seem to have that in him. Like, yes, he's flirty, and yes, he obviously has like ambitions, and he knows well enough sort of how to handle himself, but you definitely don't get the sense that he is as capable maybe of surviving as Smoke and Stack. So you do feel sort of protective of him as well, I think. And we obviously have two sort of main female characters, Annie and Mary, played by Wunmi Mosaku and Haley Steinfeld. Those two characters have really different experiences and sort of different journeys within the film. Do you feel like they sort of like helped contribute to the kind of main themes? Like, do you think they were fleshed out enough? Like, how did you get on with those two characters?
I did. I was interested to see what Haley Steinfeld would do, because she's been in a few things that I've seen, and it's all been very different. And this is completely different again. It's a very strong, powerful role. It's a character who really doesn't care what other people think of her in a lot of ways, because like when she and Stack have their first meeting after him going away and saying, yeah, I'll I love you, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And she's very upfront about what actually happened and everything, in very graphic detail, I must say as well, which I thought was very refreshing for a character, because it kind of set her up as being this person who is able to travel between different groups, like white society and obviously the coloured experience, if you like, the cotton pickers and all that, and that is explained to a certain extent within the film as well. But again, yeah, very, very powerful performance, very intelligent, the way that it was handled and the way that it was actually brought to screen. In contrast to that, Annie is a very, very different character. She's very buttoned down. She's had like a lot of life experience. She is involved in healing and herbs and potions and all this kind of thing. So it's a very different dynamic. And it's interesting to see, obviously, two brothers are so similar, but the women that they gravitate towards and the women that they love are so completely different in every way. You know, not just the colour thing, it's their demeanour, it's the way that they handle themselves, the way that they project themselves. They're both very powerful, but they're powerful in different ways. They attain their sort of stature in slightly different ways, I would say. One is more upfront, the other one is just quietly powerful. She forces people to listen to what she's saying, which is a trick in itself for anybody to do. So yeah, I thought it was done very, very well.
Yeah, and I think what's really nice is that Annie is really central to basically understanding what happens the second half of the film, because she actually knows how to handle the situation, as it were. She knows about sort of like, what would you call it, like remedies or like tricks to get, you know, people from the spirit world to stay away, or, you know, she's really important within that group, and that she is the only one that has the knowledge. And also it's implicit that they all trust her. So she's obviously been in that town for a long time. She's well known, and she obviously has this really caring and nurturing side, because she allows customers to pay in tokens. So obviously Black people at the time who were working on plantations were paid in tokens, not dollars, which obviously is just another form of keeping people sort of enslaved to a particular. And she accepts the tokens, and, you know, Smoke says to her, like, I've told you just to accept money. And she's like, no, I want to help the community. So she's definitely there as a sort of nurturer, whereas Mary seems more of a, I don't know what the word is, but like she's definitely a kind of like, you get the impression she's almost like a kind of socialite character, but because she obviously passes for white, she's able to do so within both Black society and white society. But she obviously feels her place is with the twins, and, you know, obviously Stack, she obviously feels that's where she belongs as opposed to within white society, hence why she is the only white person within the Duke. I did think they were really interesting characters, perhaps not quite as fleshed out as I would have liked them to be, but given everything else that was going on in the film, I feel like we got a full enough picture of who they were, and they were obviously important to the film for very different reasons. You know, Mary's the catalyst for one particular thing, and Annie has the sort of antidote to that. So, but I think, you know, Coogler's obviously made the choice to set it in the 30s and in sort of small town Mississippi. What I really liked about the setting in particular is Coogler has talked about how flat it is and how basically you can see for miles. And in that sense, I feel like the setting really contributes to the film, because that type of viewpoint should make you feel safe, because you could see if something was approaching. But for some reason, it doesn't within this film. The sort of endlessly flat plains actually make you feel really tense. Did you feel that when you were watching it as well?
Yeah, these sort of landscapes, like you say, should give you the ability for a sort of 360-degree view. But it's deceptive, because basically for people in that situation, like working on the plantations, danger is all around them anyway at all times. There's no kind of hiding from it, and it comes in various forms. Like there's obviously the supernatural elements that was very big, and obviously that's the kind of thing that Annie was involved in. But then you've got the ever-present threat from white society, the clan, all that kind of thing as well. So yes, and to a later extent. It's the sort of emptiness of it, because if you get in trouble in somewhere like that, then there's not really anywhere for you to hide. Yeah, so that's kind of what I kind of took from it. But yeah, you're right, it does contribute an awful lot. There are no mistakes in this film, put it that way.
We are going to get a bit spoilery, so if you haven't seen Sinners, now's a good chance to pause the podcast and come back at a later date once you've seen it.
Or, as you say, the second trailer.
Yes, go and watch the second trailer, which basically gives it all away. So let's talk vampires, because I don't think you could tell from the first trailer alone that this film is a vampire movie. And what I think is really interesting is the way that Coogler sort of positions the vampires. Like, there's a strong historical allegory going on there. There's lots of social commentary. What did you think? Because to me, this was like one of the most refreshing vampire films I've ever seen.
Yes, basically because the vampire is Irish, isn't it?
Yes, he's not Eastern European.
Yeah, exactly. It's not old European, sort of Eastern European, with everything that's implied with that, because then you're right into sort of, you're thinking about the history of vampires and where they all came from. This character is, he looks on the face of it like somebody who works the fields, in the same way that the sort of main characters in this all worked in the plantations and stuff. So it's a very, very different type of vampire. But
he's not a high society vampire either. He's not your Bela Lugosi in the fine cape and the medal. He's like, the first time we meet him, and what I think is so clever about this is he's on fire because it's daylight. But you just assume that he's on fire because he says he's on the run from the Choctaw Indians. So you assume that they've done that to him. So I think even that is just so clever.
Yes, and there is no doubt as soon as you see him that you know what he is, because very few characters, and even without them actually saying, you go, that's a vampire, because obviously they set up with the sun still in the sky and him getting basically burned. Yes, it is a very, very good introduction to him, the way that he got himself invited into the house as well. So it does use elements of vampire lore in that you have to be invited in. You can't be in sunlight, and I like the thing with the garlic as well, but we can talk about that later on. That's obviously part of the whole thing. But yes, it was a very good introduction, and I like Jack O'Connell anyway, because I've recently seen him in SAS Rogue Heroes. Now this character is not a million miles away from this, well, in terms of, it's someone who is very sure of himself, who obviously has a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge behind him. He can back up everything that he says with his actions, and that between those two characters, they are pretty similar in that way, and obviously they're both Irish as well. So I was kind of reminded about that. This to a lesser extent, because obviously his Irish accent wasn't as pronounced. It obviously mellowed with the time that he'd obviously been in the US, because you got the impression that he actually did come from Ireland. He was turned.
So he does make a comment that his dad, what is it he says, like, before they forced sort of Christianity on him. So he's from like pre-Christian Ireland, which also makes him like thousands of, or maybe at least a couple of thousand years old, maybe, or whatever. I mean, he is an ancient vampire. And I also think that the way he sort of positions himself is really interesting, because there's a sort of duality going on there, because at the start of the film, you have the local sort of, I think he's like a sheriff or something, and Smoke and Stack pay him the money, and they're like, basically tell the clan to fuck off, like if they think they're going to come here and do, and he's like, no, absolutely not. And obviously later on in the film, we see him reneging on that promise. Now, Remick is set up in a very similar way, in the sense that he believes that he's offering like peace and prosperity and love, and he offers this community where, look, we're all dancing together, everyone's all happy, you don't need to worry about lynchings or going to war for a country that doesn't give a fuck about you. Like, he promises this sort of eternal life and this sort of sharing of power and knowledge, but obviously that's a lie as well, because what he's offering is death, essentially. And so I like the fact that there was a kind of like a duality between the lies that they both told the brothers about the sort of life that they were offering, or at least the sort of like the promises that they said they would made. And when I was talking to Hugh and Dan about this in Vampire Videos, it's funny, we both said the same thing. He's like subsuming Black culture, because obviously he starts off singing like Wild Mountain Thyme and things like that, and then it becomes a bit more kind of bluesy. And we both thought about Elvis Presley, because Elvis Presley obviously is often accused of appropriating that type of Black music and Black culture and making it sort of palatable to white mainstream. And I definitely got that kind of sense of Remick, as well, as that he's kind of subsuming the culture. It's because he obviously gains the knowledge and experiences of everyone that he bites or transforms. So I really like that, the way that was positioned. And I also love the fact that, I don't know if it's just because he's so old, or maybe because he was meant to be so bad, but his eyes glow a different colour to everybody else's. So his glow red, as if to say like he is the really bad guy, whereas everyone else are kind of like shades of white and purple and blue. So I just thought it was really interesting the way that it wasn't just like vampire bites neck, because actually he doesn't bite people's necks in this. You can get bitten
And
anywhere.
shoulder,
So so I like the way that Coogler took enough of the lore to make it sort of credible and a proper threat, but actually sort of infused all of this kind of social commentary in it as well. And obviously there's like themes of like redemption and forgiveness. And yeah, what did you make of all that? Like, I just think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, I like the fact that it wasn't just full on vampire lore. There was certain things in it, like you say, with the bites, it didn't necessarily be on the neck, which kind of made sense to me, because if they are going to be in polite society, if you're turning people to become vampires, then if they're going to be living for hundreds of years, they don't regenerate into normal people. If you saw the vampires, the ones that had been shot or had been like stabbed or scarred or anything, they maintained those scars all through the film.
They did. Yeah,
it didn't change. So it's almost like a practical thing. You bite them somewhere where it's not going to be noticed, so that they can actually blend in. They're not obviously vampires, and I thought that was very, very clever. It was a nice way to do it, and it kind of highlights the fact that not that I'm feeling sorry for vampires, but it must be quite tricky for them being around for such a long time and not getting injured in some way, something that would, show up like a facial injury or whatever, something like that, because then they wouldn't be able to mix at all. They would just be so obvious. I really like the fact of the shared memory.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite unusual. I don't know if I've seen that. I've seen it in some things before, a sort of collective memory. I liked that, because then Remick was at an advantage, because he knew everything about everybody that he'd obviously turned, and there were certain people that were turned, and he was able to gain so much information from that. And like you say, the information about the clan and all that as well. So you could argue the fact that, no, these guys they're coming for you, because, and he explained how it had all happened. Yeah, I thought that was very, very well done. And it was an interesting change more than anything else. And that kind of fed into the whole, we're okay, we're kind of the future here, come and join the collective. Everybody knows what everybody else knows, and we are all one. And you're kind of thinking, well, are you? Because you've still got this sort of titular head who is basically crazy, but crazy in a very quiet way, I would say, more than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely think that he was so unnerving to me, because the whole way through his Jack O'Connell's performance, it was like he was trying to mimic being a human. And the scene that in particular stands out for me, which he learned to play the banjo for, is when he shows up at the club at the first time, and he's got the two clan members that he's turned, and they sing that, first of all, Pick Poor Robin Clean, which I cannot get out of my head no matter how much I try to listen to other stuff. It's just there. And they're playing the banjo, but they're doing these movements, and they're all moving like perfectly in sync with each other, but there's just something off. Like, there's something vaguely mechanical about what they're doing. And it reminded me of, like, do you know how when you go on like rides at Disneyland and it's like people that are meant to be dancing, like It's a Small World or something, you're like, no, this is like a proper uncanny valley. Like, to me, that's what it felt like. His performance was like he could only ever mimic being a human because he'd been a vampire for so long. And I really love that element of the performance, was that he wasn't like this super slick Eastern European count who was dramatic and charming and hypnotic. He was fucking scary, but in a very tangible way, not just because he was a white man confronting a black juke joint in the 1930s in Mississippi, but there was something genuinely uncanny about him.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that as well when he was plucking away?
Yeah, when a character has a lot of stillness about them, then you're drawn to that character. You're drawn to actually seeing what he is going to do, because there's always anticipation of shit going down really quickly. Yeah. And I liked that. It was very interesting. I read that the character was partially inspired by the character of Death in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And when you look at images of that character, he's got red eyes. The character has red eyes. It's a big it's almost like a wolf character. And again, that really informs the performance as well, because
like a hunter-prey situation. Yes,
he treads very softly, he moves about, and then he pounces. He chooses his time. He chooses it well. And I thought, that kind of really works. That it was very, very good indeed. But again, a lot of it is down to the actors themselves. In order to get that across, and I think he does it very well in this instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've obviously touched on it there that he does give a performance or two. So let's talk about Ludwig Göransson, who is the man behind the Mandalorian theme. Let's talk about his soundtrack for this film, because I think it creates a real emotional resonance, but it also really is fueled by proper 1930s African-American spiritual music, blues music. We obviously have some Irish classics in there as well. Got Rocky Road to Dublin. This film is not a musical, but the music is so intrinsic to this film. I think it's incredible.
It is, yes. It's steeped in music from start to finish, because the very opening scene, you have the church and what are they singing? This Little Light of Mine, I think it is. They're actually singing in the church. So you immediately start off with music being at the center of it, like I say, with the choir in the church, and Preacher Boy coming in with the neck of a guitar as well. So you're kind of going, right, so music is in this, and it basically goes all the way through it. There are a couple of small musical performances. You've got Delta Slim playing the harmonica in the train station, and then there's a duet between him and Preacher Boy doing a tune. And then when it actually gets to the club itself, that's got music pretty much all the way through it. There are performances in that. There's a big major performance where it switches between the club and what's going on outside. And it starts off, they're kind of separate, and then it intermingles. But yes, everything to do with that, everything to do with the sort of the culture of the time, like you say, with spirituals. And it's kind of round about almost like the birth of the blues. This is where a lot of stuff came out of. A lot of Robert Johnston and people like that came out of the South at that time, and it was the blues that they were actually putting forward, and they started to get recognition for that. And then you've got the whole Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil kind of thing as well, as a wee sort of side to that. But yes, the music was just immense in this. And again, very cleverly done. I read an interview with Ludwig Göransson. He said that I think his father played blues music.
Oh, wow, right.
So he was kind of steeped in it anyway, so he knew what he wanted to do here, and it was completely in sync with what Ryan Coogler was looking for in terms of the soundtrack and the sort of soundscape of the film as well, and how it all kind of mingled in. It's one of these soundtracks that isn't just music, it's everything around it as well, and it's been worked in really, really nicely. So it's seamless, really.
Yeah. And I think it's really neat how, from the offset, Preacher Boy's dad obviously says to him, basically juke joints are where the devil lives, and the music is demonic. So obviously straight away you're sort of understanding the importance of music. But I think it really ties in with sort of Coogler's sort of visual style, because you have Sammy's sort of big set piece where he sings I've Lied to You, and you've got Perline's solo as well. And I couldn't stop myself from my toes were tapping in the cinema, those scenes about. And I think what was so amazing about them was you got to see an African American community at that time actually just let loose and give their bodies over to the music, as opposed to, you know, when we see them previously, they're like toiling in a plantation. And so the power behind that music to allow that sort of freedom, I thought was incredible. And then you also have that kind of piercing the veil scene where you get to see all these different spirits. Sort of, like, how did that work for you in terms of sort of kind of visual style? Because it's definitely, I would say that in particular, when you start to see all the spirits appear in the juke joint, I felt like that was wild compared, because the film is quite a straight narrative up until that point, whereas this sort of brings in this whole other element. Did that work for you?
It did. It was a bit unusual when I saw it, but then I understood what they were trying to get to with that, in that it was saying that within each culture that is represented by people who are actually there in the hall, because it was obviously like sort of callbacks to Native Americans, it was callbacks to the Chinese community as well, and they had all these sort of elements in it. And it's basically saying, no matter who you are or where you are, music is at the center of your life. This is what it's all about for you. And that whole scene, the sort of subtle build up to that, if you think about it, the first musical scene that you have is in a church. It's all very buttoned down, very staid. It wasn't like a revival. Like sometimes you get these sort of revival things at churches, and it's very dynamic and exuberant. This wasn't. This was very sort of, the choir was singing. It's all very quiet and nice. And then you got Preacher Boy singing in the car, and it was this wee sort of lift up from there, and then you had Preacher Boy and Delta Slim, and it lifted up from there, and then you got this, and it was building up in terms of the intensity of the music, and then you had this big this big blowout scene actually in the club, and you think, it was very nicely done. They didn't overload one of the earlier scenes, because they could quite easily have done that. But that would have taken away from the dynamic impact of that particular scene. And I just thought it was excellent the way that they did that, and then the way added element of the various spirits from other times coming in, I thought worked well, because it was heightened at that point anyway, so it didn't feel as if it was just added in for maybe like political reasons or like some sort of social reasons. It felt as if it could be part of the story quite easily. So I quite liked it.
Yeah, because they've established, or Sammy is told, that certain types of music is sort of so strong that it can bring these spirits out. So it did feel like a very natural transition. And as you say, like it doesn't go in at a 9 like it does. It has this nice slow build up until that point, and then it almost becomes like the music sort of becomes like a pulse to the film. And I think that was really, it really stood out to me, because I just thought it, you know, as I say, I think for a vampire film, it was doing something very unusual, and it was this notion that music would bring these spirits out, which I don't think I've ever seen in a vampire film before. I know people are calling this basically like Dusk Till Dawn set in the 30s, but I don't think I've ever seen like music sort of bringing actually drawing a vampire out. But obviously in this case, it's because Remick wants to sort of subsume that culture. He wants those memories or those sort of skills as part of his hive mind kind of thing. So I really like the way that the music was important. And obviously, as I say, from the setup, Sammy's told that it's the devil. So I really like that. Other than that, I mean, were there any standout scenes or moments that sort of left apart from that sort of big shindig that literally wakes the dead? Like, were there any kind of standout scenes for you within the film?
I really liked the first scene between Preacher Boy and his father. Is it Jedediah? Yeah. And that whole scene foreshadows the rest of the film. It basically sets everything up, because, like you say, it sets up the fact that music is evil. It's going to get him into trouble. But the father also says, if you keep playing with the devil, he's going to follow you home. And that is basically the second half of the film, because they've set up this juke joint, the music's playing, it's loud, and the vampire Remick is attracted to it, because he understands the power of music as well. And I like that, the way that all kind of worked, and it was all from that particular initial scene more
Yeah.
than anything else. So yes, that was very early in the film, and you're kind of saying, well, you know, looking at it from a sort of critical point, which we obviously do more than just like a purely enjoyable point, you're saying, well, how does this fit in later on? And that paid off really, really well, based on the fact that that was just a wee sort of 2-minute scene, no more, no less. So that's all it takes to set something up in that sort of manner, and that's very clever, and that's obviously quite a standout, based on the fact that obviously there are other scenes in there that are like big and bold and brash, but it's in this case, I think it's the smaller scenes, it's the scenes that set things up, because there was obviously that was like an introduction to Preacher Boy, and then right after that there was the introduction to the twins as well, where they have the truck with all the booze on it, but there's a snake there, and the snake is obviously seen as being a sort of devil thing as well.
Yeah.
And it's the way that they deal with that snake between the two of them. And that introduces them, and it introduces their bond between them as well. So again, very clever, sets everything up, how the drama and the action is going to play out later on as well. So yeah, very nice. What about yourself?
Do you know, there's a couple, so I think for me, they kept talking about Italian wine and Irish beer, and I kept wondering why they were naming or the country of origin specifically. And then you have Mary say, you know, how long is it going to take for those two basically mafia rivals, the Irish and the Italians, to work out that you've stolen from them both? And then you realise that's why the twins have come home, because they've pulled off like a kind of heist or whatever, and they've set two different gangs against each other in Chicago. So that was like a penny drop moment for me. I was like, that's so clever, because there's no, like, they just kept referring to it as Italian wine and Irish, and I'm like, why do you keep saying where it comes from? And that to me was like a proper, like, oh, that's so well done. But I also really like the scene where they're all sort of the bracing themselves inside the juke joint, and all I kept thinking was, you just need to wait till morning, and you just don't need to let anyone in. It's really simple. Those two things are going to get you out if you're alive. And then, of course, because Remick has threatened the shopkeeper's daughter, she's just like, come in, motherfuckers. And it just explodes from there. Like, it's properly, like, blood spatter, like, violent. And I just thought, like, it wasn't a film that necessarily I thought was going to go to that level. But again, it somehow worked, because she was so scared for her daughter, and obviously had lost her husband already and didn't want to be sort of the only one left in her family. So she was just like, fuck it, bring it on. And of course, everyone's standing there with, like, I love as well when they've got like the garlic juice in the mason jar, and they throw it over one of the vampires. And obviously, like, they sort of, it was just, there was so much going on in that scene. But yeah, I really liked the fact that it probably already was operating at, like, you know, a 10 by that point, and she was just like, come in. And I was like, oh my God, it was like the one thing you should not do, don't let them in. But yeah, they all took it as an invite, and all hell broke loose. So I really liked that. And I thought it was a nice sort of, like, up until that point, I felt like it'd been like just kind of simmering, sort of dark and moody, and then it just went absolutely batshit. And I really, really appreciated the fact that it went there, because I wasn't expecting that, actually.
Yeah, it's very much like From Dusk Till Dawn in that aspect. So that's where you can see the comparisons there. And there's a reasonably slow build up, and then, like I say, it just pivots basically on that one moment, and all hell breaks loose. So yes, aye.
And what did you think of the pacing? Like, because I feel like for the first hour, you would not know this film was a vampire film, and then, as you say, like, kind of like, oh shit, hits the fan. Like, did you think that was quite well balanced, or?
Yes, it was necessary.
Yeah,
it definitely was. Yes, because you had to get a sense of why everyone was doing what they were doing. You had to get a sense of who the brothers were, what their influence was, what their background was, and why all these people would be in the one place at the one time. So, and it did that quite nicely, because it took its time. It explained how they were going to do it, what they actually needed in order to do it, why the Chinese shop owners were there in the first place. They obviously had history with them. They all knew each other. They were all like old friends or acquaintances at the very least. So it needed that in order to get there. And then when it actually did pivot to this all-out action bloodbath, you kind of understood what everybody's part in that was and why they were actually there. So yes, it did it made perfect sense. And like you say, there was elements in it where you could say, well, they just don't need to open the door, they could stay the night. But that it wasn't as simple as that, because they didn't know who had been turned.
Yeah.
Because there was people who were not around when certain things were happening. You didn't know if they were okay, or if they weren't okay and all that. So yes, all of the build-up was necessary for the payoff. And I think it worked perfectly well. It wasn't boring at any point, because it was very well written. So the whole setup and everything, you were intrigued. You wanted to know more. You wanted to get into these characters' lives a lot more, which you didn't. You were, like you say, with the Irish beer and the Italian wine, you got snippets here and there, and eventually there was a bit of a payoff for everything. But it wasn't spoon-fed to you, and it wasn't fed to you quickly either.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Coogler obviously has taken his time to build these characters up, to build the background up enough so that, like, for example, we know that Annie understands what a haint is, and she makes them all eat the cloves of garlic, and you understand that she's going to be sort of integral to their survival, and you understand why Mary is sort of drawn outside to Remick as an outsider as well, because she feels like she's sort of straddling two worlds the same way that Remick is. Like, there's all these beautiful little moments that need to be there in order for basically the batshit stuff to make sense, like the violence and the sort of operatic sort of conclusion that it builds to. I was also thinking about the title as well. So I feel like the title of the film feels really weighty, and obviously, like, funnily enough, I went to see it on Good Friday, so Sinners felt like perfect Catholic guilt fodder. And it's a film that definitely sort of like dabbles in like themes of, I say dabbles, that's not fair. It definitely has themes of like forgiveness and redemption, good versus evil. Do you like the title? Do you like the fact that it is sort of playing on the whole notion of like there's a good and a bad? Because that I feel like there's dualities running through the film a lot, and we obviously see that with Smoke and Stack, when one is turned and one is not, and he gets that beautiful grenade toss moment that is, I love a grenade toss in a film, and that was just like, it was so good. How do you feel like the sort of title sort of lends itself to all these themes that Coogler's trying to sort of unpick? Yeah,
well, obviously religion played a big part in Black communities, especially around the plantation. It was a sort of a salvation for a lot of people. And you and I both know that when we are born sinners with original sin on our souls. And it's only when we're baptized that actually gets taken away, and we are now pure and everything. This is one of the few things I remember from catechisms. And
I was going to say, John and I both went to Catholic school, in case you couldn't guess.
Yeah. So that was the immediate standout, and I didn't really think about the duality of it at all, actually, but it makes kind of sense. And the fact that it's plural, it's sinners, so it's not just one person. You've got the two there, and you've also got the community, and everybody is a sinner in a way. So it's degrees of evil and badness, because I don't think there's really any of the sort of central characters who don't have some sort of element in their past that they would regret, and obviously then they would be regarded as sinners through that as well. So it's not just Remick who can be regarded, but others can. Some of the supporting people can as well, because they've obviously been involved in slightly less than legal things in the past, obviously through association to Smoke and Stack as well. So yes, it does play into that whole thing, and it is the religious thing and the devil thing, and obviously the vampire element plays into that as well, because they're uncast. Like a vampire, for instance, in part of the lore, it can't go on to holy ground. And some it's not mentioned here at all, because obviously it's not like a church or anything is involved in any of the action, but that's like part of sort of your vampire lore as well. So it's it's all in there for me. But yes, I didn't think about it that deeply, to be honest. Yeah, I just liked it from the sense that, like, Sinners, and obviously I've got Michael B. Jordan in the poster, so you're assuming that maybe his character has done something wrong, but actually to me it's like it's talking about like the wider society. It's the
marginalized Choctaw community who obviously are vampire hunters because we see them in pursuit of Remick. It's the fact that the people who are working the plantation don't actually get paid in money. It's the fact that white society still doesn't accept the fact that, you know, these two brothers were willing to lay their lives on the line and fight for their country, and they're still treated as like second-class citizens. It's the reneging of the promise from the clan. It's like it's the society as a whole. It's not even just about good versus evil. It's about the structure of American society in the 1930s, and you know what that was, how that was experienced by obviously people in the African American community. So I think, I mean, everything that Ryan Coogler does in this film feels like there is a point to it, and that everything feels sort of like laden with like subtext or another meaning. And there's people who've done deep dives who actually talk about like the symbolization of twins and like Yoruba culture, or, you know, the reason that Remick sings Rocky Road to Dublin. You know, it's about a man who goes away to try and make his fortune. It doesn't quite work out, so he has to come back, which is obviously the story of the twins. There's loads and loads of deep dives on this. And I just think it's, there's so much meat on the bones here. And I think that's why I really love this film, is like, I would love to go back and actually watch it again and just pick up on the stuff that I've no doubt missed first time around, because it does feel like there is a lot to it. Did you get that sense as well when you were watching it, that you were like, I feel like there's loads to this film?
Yeah, it's very rich in terms of its content, really, isn't it? And that is good because, like I said previously, you only need small pieces. You don't need full stories of backgrounds or explanations of things, because the film encourages you to actually use your own imagination and think. Well, obviously it says, like, for instance, the brothers were at war, and it doesn't really mention too much apart from that, and you just know it was hell, because war is hell anyway. So, and it was probably doubly bad for the brothers because they were black in a situation where it was a lot of white Europeans fighting each other, you know, more than anything else. So there's all that stuff going on as well, and you get a chance to find out a little bit without finding out too much. It keeps you wanting more, so it keeps you interested. Yeah, definitely does. Yeah,
I feel like we're going to have a vampire off for top 10 of the year, because obviously Nosferatu and Sinners have come out in the same year, both very, very different takes on the vampire film, but very, very well executed. So would you recommend Sinners to our dear listener?
I would, without any reservation whatsoever. I think it is quite possibly one of the best films of the year. I'll keep my powder dry on that one at the moment. You never know, there may be another 8 vampire films that come out that are slightly better. Yeah, but yes, I would definitely recommend it. Yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this film, like, it has it's pulsating, it's violent, it's sensual, it's exciting. Like, I definitely think if you want to see something really refreshing done with a sort of well-loved genre, this is the film to watch. And like I said, 2 Michael B. Jordans is not the worst thing to ever happen to cinema. So yes, definitely would recommend it. I know there's obviously been some sort of, taking apart the film aside, I know there's been some kind of controversies that we can perhaps chat about. Obviously, people have spoken about Coogler's deal, about his ownership of the rights of the film, and obviously there was I believe it was the Variety article about the box office takings and how celebrities have sort of jumped on to protect the film. So we're obviously recommending this film. Why do you think that cinema media or cinema titles, whatever you want to call them, are being so negative on something that's, you know, it's fresh, it doesn't belong to an IP, it's not world building, it's not part of a franchise? Why are they not like uplifting a film like this that's so well done? Why are they shitting on it from a great height, it seems? I
wouldn't like to think that it's a racist thing, but I can only think that it's playing a part now, given the shit show that is the political system through most of the Western world. Then I can only imagine that they don't want to see what's classed as a minority group doing particularly well. Yes, the headlines around this film have not been great. It's saying it's a great film, but it's it cost a lot of money, so therefore it's not doing particularly. And obviously that's been completely blown away now because it's been out for like 3 weeks and it's
I think it's
more
just
than
crossed
made
the
its budget.
$200 million
Yeah.
mark on a budget of what I think it was 90 million. So it's made its money back. But I just think it's really unusual that a film with such a well-known director and such, you know, a well-known lead has been really trashed on, like to the extent where other actors, like you've got Ben Stiller coming out and obviously basically telling Variety or whatever it was to piss off, and then you've got like Tom Cruise coming out holding up a cinema ticket saying like, I'm supporting this film, congrats to the team, it's brilliant. It's just, I've never really seen a reaction like this, both from the press, and then obviously it's really nice and actually reassuring that sort of bigger stars are saying like, go and support this film, it's great, you should go and watch it, you know, congrats to all involved. It's just, and it is one of these things where you don't want to think it's a race thing, but actually is that what this is stemming from? In which case you've all learned fucking nothing from the film. You know, like it's unbelievable in a way that this is kind of how these titles are so desperate for clickbait that they would actually do something like that. I mean, Coogler will not be the first or last director to have secured the rights to his own film after X amount of time. So I guess I don't see the controversy, but obviously these titles or these review titles, whatever, are kind of gunning for it feels.
Yeah, there is a bit of almost like bad blood about the fact that he will be owning his own film, which, given the state of entertainment and the way that products are gobbled up and then recycled by the owners, it's more prevalent in music than it is in film, I think, but I don't think film's too far behind. Like, for instance, the record companies own the rights to an album, for instance, and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. They can re-release it. They can, you know, without the artist's consent. It doesn't. They usually work with the artist because then it's a good publicity thing. But they can do whatever the hell they want with it. And it's the same with films as well. If a film company wanted to take Sinners and cut it up into 30-minute chunks and put it on the television, they could do that if they owned it. They're perfectly entitled to do that. They own the product. It's theirs. So by him making sure that he owns his own film, then he's in control of what happens to that in future years, what type of releases happen to that film, who releases it, if there is anything that comes from this film in terms of not so much sequels, but you know, if it does attain a certain level of IP, then he's in charge of all that. He's fully controlled, and that's the way it should be. It was the same with Sing Sing that we reviewed. That was owned by the cast and crew. It wasn't owned by a studio. They did it all themselves. So yes, I can fully understand why filmmakers do that, but a lot of them don't get the chance to do that because they are working for a studio, or it's all based on the money that comes in from like film funds and all these sort of things. There's a lot of horse trading to be done on these films, and a lot of time filmmakers don't have the power. It's only when they get to a certain stage that they actually have the power to be in charge of their own destiny, you know. So yeah.
No, it's very interesting, and that sort of, I guess, neatly wraps up our thoughts on Sinners in general. If you guys have seen it, let us know. Let us know what you think of this pod. If there's anything we've missed that you feel like you could do a deep dive in, let us know, and we'll absolutely give you a shout out on the next pod. So to follow this up, we thought we would take a look at not more vampires, because you've probably just listened to that in our Nosferatu pod. We thought we would have a look at 3 films whose soundtracks we could not stop listening to, because basically Sinners has not been off my Spotify since I saw it. So, John, would you like to grace us with your first pick? What soundtrack did you have on repeat?
This is a soundtrack for a film that is 50 years old this year, which is quite amazing. It is Jaws from 1975.
Nice. The
film that is pretty much credited with starting the whole blockbuster phase of modern cinema. I remember seeing news reports at the time when it came out of queues round the block because there wasn't such a thing as online ticketing. Back then you had to queue in order to get into a cinema. And one of the major elements of the film is the soundtrack. And for the most part, it's based on 2 notes. which
Yep.
is kind of amazing. This doo-doo. And that's it in various
Even
guises.
just you doing that, I'm like, oh, that's so freaky.
Yep. It works so well because it's a film about a shark. It's a film about a predator. Although a lot of people think the film is not so much about the shark, it's about so many other things. A lot of people have written a lot of words about the Jaws film, and I'm not going to go into that here. I'm going to concentrate on the soundtrack. John Williams came up with the idea for this soundtrack, played it on the piano for Steven Spielberg, who thought it was a joke. He didn't.
You're joking?
No, he thought it was a joke. Steven Spielberg had envisaged a sort of pirate type theme because he was likening the pirate to the shark in the way it pillages and everything, and it's this constant presence on the sea that is a danger. So he was imagining something completely different, and John Williams put him 2 notes and said, "This is what this is my idea." But it very quickly changed Spielberg's mind because they obviously said, "Well, this is what we're going to do. This is going to follow the shark through the water when it's going to speed up or slow down. It's not just going to be these 2 notes all the time." And it was done in such. It was very unusual the way they did it. They did it on a tuba rather than doing sort of like on like French horns or anything. So it was sort of deeper and more menacing because of the instrumentation they used. And again, that played into the whole, sort of the horror from the deep element as well. And it fitted so well into that film that it won an Academy Award for the music as well. So it was just a perfect blend of visuals and something that was so far out there that it actually got people on edge. And like you say, when people hear that theme, they know exactly what it is.
Yep.
And they know exactly what it's referring to, because if you hear those 2 notes, you think of a shark going through the water in the dark.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, right. So
yeah.
Absolutely perfect. And it does work on its own, which is crucial for a soundtrack. That was one of the things I thought about. Like you said, it's soundtracks that we can't stop listening to. You can listen to the Jaws soundtrack on its own, and it's like this audio poem, if you like. It tells the story of the film because you can imagine what it's like and everything. And even if you've never seen Jaws, and my God, who are you? For a start.
Samuel standing around at your door with all of his various copies, sequels, and all the rest of it.
Yes. So it works on its own, which is crucial for a good soundtrack. It's good if you can watch a film without any sound, and it's good if you can listen to a soundtrack without any visuals. If they can be separate entities at the same time, then
very profound.
That's a sign that it works on its own merits and it works together. So, and that's very unusual.
Yeah, I would agree. I struggled with this because I'm going to give honourable shout outs to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, which every song is a banger on that, and Donnie Darko as well, because I really like the score to this. But for my first pick, I'm going to go with the 2011 Nicholas Winding Refn film Drive. My husband is so obsessed with this film that he actually has the scorpion jacket that Ryan Gosling has. And Cliff Martinez is the man behind the score. I think this works because it's that kind of mix of like synth, electronica, and sort of retro kind of vibey sound of music that you would actually want to drive along to. So I think that's why it works really well. But I think it sort of gives the film its pulse, because obviously there are moments where there's like a time limit on, the driver getting away. There's obviously car chases, there's love scenes, there's violence. And I think that the score lends itself to all of those different sort of emotions and scenes really perfectly. And I definitely have listened to it over and over. Some of my favorite songs on it are Night Call, Tick of the Clock, Hammer, and Real Hero. And when I'm listening to it, I can picture exactly what scene is happening in the film at that time, which I think again is a sign of a really good score or soundtrack, in that you always associate it with that particular scene. And it's funny because whenever you hear like a piece of the soundtrack sort of not being used in Drive, whenever you hear it somewhere else, you're like, but that's the Drive music, or that's when Ryan Gosling's doing whatever. So I think that this score is I think it's an absolute masterpiece, and I hate to use the cliche, it's almost like a character itself, but it's so, again, a bit like Sinners, it's so important to the film that you can't sort of extract the two because they're just sort of intrinsically linked. So yeah, that is my first pick.
Nice. Drive is such a good film. It's one of the ones that was, I think it was in my top 3 for the year, and partly the reason for that was the music. It was the likes of Johnny Jewel and people like that that did the soundtrack for it, the music soundtrack, and I just loved everything about it. I like synth music anyway, so
I love a bit of 80s.
It just really hit a sort of high watermark. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there was an alternative score done when the film was shown on the BBC. It was rescored by Zane Lowe for the BBC in 2014.
How bizarre!
I know, and it was only shown on the BBC. It had different artists on it. I don't think it had any of the score, and it had sort of pre-recorded music on it, and they were slotted in. And I think it didn't work quite as well, but it was an interesting experiment, I thought, the way that it was actually put together and the reason they did it. I don't know if that's commercially available.
I was going to say, I'd be intrigued to see it just to make a sort of point of comparison, because for me the music is so much a part of this film that I can't imagine any other songs or pieces of score involved. So it would be interesting to see if that is sort of available just to compare.
I'll probably somewhere, maybe not officially.
Maybe not legally.
Yeah. But yes, very good choice. And did you note the lack of surprise on my face when you said that your dear husband had the scorpion jacket? I kind of expected that anyway.
I know, honestly, Ryan Gosling is I'm pretty sure Chris would leave me for him if the offer was there. And so a film about driving with electronic music and a cool jacket, I'm surprised Chris doesn't watch it just on loop, to be quite honest with you. We do have the special edition downstairs that comes with loads of different booklets and essays and stuff on it as well. It's definitely one of his favourite films of all time. And so how could I not pick it?
Yep. When does he wear the jacket?
What happens between Tim and yours? And that's as far as I'll go on that before I hit a wee beaver.
Yep, let's just leave that right there.
Yep, moving swiftly on. Your second pick.
My second pick is Blade Runner from 1982. This is a film that is very close to my heart. I have this film on pretty much every format apart from 4K UHD. I have it. I've got 2 versions on video. Video cassette. Yeah. So the background to the film, or the production of the film, was it came out in various different versions. There was the initial version, which had the sort of Sam Spade detective voiceover type thing, and then they did a director's cut, which didn't have that, and it's been released in various formats ever since. It's come out in Blu-ray, it's come out on HD DVD. There's been a 5-disc box set that had work prints and all sorts of things, and there's an ultimate edition, which is very nice. But throughout the whole process, the music has stayed the same, and that's the music of Vangelis, who mixed a sort of a more traditional score with sort of heavy synthesized elements. Now, this was a score that he did after Chariots of Fire. It was the year after.
How bizarre! What a bad move!
I know,
something that's quite a classic British film to that. Wow, that's insane.
They go where the work is, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is a score that a lot of sort of heavy synth, epic sort of soundscapes. It's almost like soundscapes rather than just a soundtrack. And this informs all of the beats within this film. And again, it's an album that you can listen to quite happily on its own. And it's some of the more poignant parts are beautiful pieces of music. It's just so subtle, so nice. And it covers the Rutger Hauer speech as well, tears in the whole Tears in the Rain one, when you go, I know he's a bad guy, but which I was really somebody had mentioned that. It was on I don't know if it was on a t-shirt or something. I'd said to Leslie, that's really cool. And she's like, what's that? I was kind of like, out women.
I'm married.
yeah. For goodness sake, it's an iconic speech, attack ships off the shoulder, attack ships and fire off the shoulder of Orion, and he's dying at the same time. And all this. Oh, sorry, spoilers for a 1982
Oh
film.
yeah, that's ruined it
Yeah.
for Leslie now. She listens to this
Yeah.
podcast before she watches it. Yeah,
I think she'll be fine. I think she'll be all right. But yeah, it's a fantastic soundtrack and it fits in really well with the film. And it was something that I hadn't really heard up until that point. There was obviously other electronic scores about, obviously, like previously mentioned, the likes of Chariots of Fire, but there's also all the John Carpenter stuff as well, where he did his own music. Now, in one of those, like Assault on Precinct 13 was in consideration for this list at one point as well, but I went with Vangelis rather than that. Assault on Precinct 13 you will know right away when you hear it because it's quite a simple tune and it's kind of iconic. I think it's been used like sort of dance remixes and stuff like that as well in the last like 15, 20 years. It's a film that isn't particularly well known now. I think there's a remake of it done as well. But yeah, anyway, I've completely went away to the side when we were talking about. So my second pick was the Vangelis soundtrack. Have you got any views on that one?
Yeah, no, it's. Do you know what? I'm going to put this out there. I'm not the biggest Blade Runner fan ever, and again, Chris doesn't get that because he loves Blade Runner in 2049 as well. But the soundtrack is really, it's that sort of like synthy, grungy. It's the exact soundtrack you would anticipate for a film that's set in that setting. Do you understand what I mean? It fits the design of the world really, really well. But you've absolutely blown my mind that it's the same Chariots of Fire composer. I just didn't know that. So that's one of the most random film facts I think I've ever heard. My next pick is every high school English teacher's favourite movie. It's Baz Luhrmann's 1996 Romeo and Juliet. I was obviously too young to see this film when it came out, but it felt like a sort of instant cult classic when it did come out. And I remember like going to sleepovers and people had it on video. And obviously you had Leonardo DiCaprio as a sort of heartthrob lead and a very clever reimagining of a classic work. I think there are a lot of 90s kids who actually liked Shakespeare because of this film. So the soundtrack, as you would expect with a Baz Luhrmann film, is a mix of sort of contemporary pop and ballads. I believe when it came out, the CD, which I did have, went triple platinum in the US. Like this is how big this score was. So you've got likes of Radiohead's talk show host, Young Hearts Run Free, and of course the absolutely stunning Kissing You by Desiree. Special shout out to the Cardigans' Love Fool, which I actually really like as a song, but if you've ever seen Hot Fuzz and their rendition of Romeo and Juliet, it basically ruins this song.
Yeah.
But it feels very of its time. It feels very mid-90s. And I just think that there's lots of great tunes on there. You could absolutely listen to it by itself and you would never know that these were the songs that were accompanying, a Shakespeare film where they actually do use like rhyming couplets. It's not a Shakespeare reimagined in the sense that they just speak like, normal English inverted commas. They are actually using the original language. And I think it really sort of, Baz Luhrmann obviously was known by that point, but I think this really sort of set his stall out in terms of what he was going to do as a director from there on out. And he's done the same with the Elvis movie. Obviously, how could you not have a good soundtrack for Elvis? But I think it definitely showed that he was a director that was willing to sort of mix things up, do things a bit differently. You see it in Great Gatsby as well. Even if you don't like the film, there's no denying that the soundtrack is a bit of a banger. And so yeah, I thought this was a perfect pick because in the summer of 96 or whatever it was, there wasn't a teenage girl or a young girl who did not have this CD and dreaming of Leonardo DiCaprio with his little suit of armour on and Claire Danes and her angel wings. It was perfect.
Yep. It's one of the few soundtracks that spawned a second album.
Yeah.
There was a volume 2. Then that's quite unusual. You occasionally get things like that, but it doesn't happen as often as you think. So having 2 CDs worth of music is quite a lot of music in a film. So,
and you know what? It does really make me miss the days when you would, and that's why I think I've really attached myself to Sinners, because I've really enjoyed listening to the soundtrack, because thinking about these films like Romeo and Juliet in particular, it makes me miss the days where you would go out and buy a CD of a film score and, listen to it to death, basically. And I think that Romeo and Juliet was a big sort of moment for that type of thing. As you say, it spawned a second album, but it makes me miss that. A wee trip to Woolies or something to go and pick up a CD.
Yeah, there are a few record labels that specialize in producing soundtracks on various formats, vinyl and CDs, but they're few and far between these days and they're quite small. There's one out of Bristol called Invader. They do an awful lot. They do some of the Black Mirror stuff and Warren Ellis and Nick Cave soundtracks and things like that. There's a lot of really good soundtracks on there for lots and lots of different things. But yes, they are kind of, it was always a nice thing to pick up a soundtrack CD for something, even something that I haven't actually heard or seen before, and you think, oh, just a couple of quid, that'll do, I'll listen to that, and it may or may not be great, but usually it's usually pretty interesting because there's some good people involved in them. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, and your third and final pick?
My third and final pick is going to be regarded as a classic soundtrack in years to come. It was cruelly overlooked at the Oscars this year, as was the film itself. The film is Challengers, which from Luca Guadagnino, it's described as a romantic sports film. It's based on...
It's a new genre.
Yes. Almost like a love triangle between three tennis players. And it's the rivalry between the two male tennis players that is at the heart of the film. Now, the soundtrack itself is done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Oh, right, okay.
And it's this sort of synth-heavy EDM style, so almost like a soundscape in itself. I know I've said that a couple of times, but it is like that. And it works so well because there are elements of the film where it's a tennis match that's actually playing out. Now, watching a tennis match on screen is not, the best sort of use of your time, I would say, normally.
Have we learned nothing from strangers on a train?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But this is done slightly differently. You get various perspectives of, like, you actually get the perspective of the ball, and then it concentrates on particular players and like how they're all like getting really sweaty and horrible, and it's these big long rallies and stuff. And in the middle of this is a soundtrack that's just pushing everything along. It's so propulsive, and it's just brilliant. It's such a good score, and I cannot understand why it didn't even get a nomination for an Oscar. It really stands out as being something that is just totally excellent. I am at a loss to understand, given some of the music that's actually out there and getting nominated, which is it's okay, but it's a bit safe and it's not memorable. Now, this is a soundtrack I will listen to again and again because it's a memorable soundtrack and it's something slightly different. And again, works very well with the visuals, works equally well on its own, just because it's very, very good electronic music. Yeah,
I am yet to see Challengers, but I do remember the outcry of that not being Oscar nominated. It definitely looks like my kind of film, and I love a bit of synthy, electronic-y sort of that kind of vibe. So I'll definitely seek it out, if only to listen to the soundtrack, because it does sound kind of like the sort of thing that I would actually listen to anyway.
Yeah, brilliant.
I've gone slightly classical for my last pick. So I've gone with Giuseppe Tornatore's 1988 film Cinema Paradiso, because how could you not? The score is composed by Ennio Morricone, and quite frankly, just hearing a few bars of it is enough to make me sort of tear up. The love theme, obviously, is what plays over that gorgeous collage of cinema kisses at the end, which sometimes I will just go and watch that on YouTube because I need a good cry, and there it is, and the music is just powerful. But there are sort of like lovely other pieces throughout the soundtrack. If you kind of listen to it on Spotify, like some of the ones that I like are Toto and Alfredo, Maturity, and the main theme obviously is like equally beautiful that goes through it as well. I just think it's such an iconic piece of composition. Like the film itself obviously is much beloved within the cinema community because it's a film about cinema, but I actually think that this score is like, I mean, people have had it at their weddings, like people use it as like, like pieces of like in place of like kind of choral music or whatever at like big occasions. And I just think it's one of these sort of sweeping pieces of music that really sort of sweeps you up along with it, if that makes sense. Like it does.
Yep.
You've got a real sense of like occasion and purpose and drama and romance, and all of the things that the film has to offer is there in Morricone's score. And yeah, it really just makes me, the bottom lip starts trembling when I listen to it, and it's just a gorgeous piece of music. And as I say, I will go and watch that kissing scene, or the kisses scene rather, on YouTube just on a whim, just because I'm maybe having a bad day or whatever. It's so, yeah, I love the drama of it. I love the emotion of it. And I think it's perfect for this film, because this film obviously is about a love of cinema and
Yes.
sort of passion and emotion that goes along with that. And so I think the score is absolutely perfect. No notes.
Yep, no, you're right. Yeah, I will not be taking questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of the Morricone stuff, especially Cinema in Paradiso, has a life of its own.
Yeah.
People, I reckon that a lot of people have come to that music without even knowing.
Oh, 100%.
Or not
Yeah.
seeing the film, and it just works so well. It's so beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of music, and it's something you wouldn't tire of listening to it at any time. Yeah.
No, it's just absolutely gorgeous. So, well, that's our picks. But if you've got any outstanding soundtracks that you think deserve a shout out, you can obviously let us know on all the usual social channels, including Blue Sky. You can give us a follow on there as well. And if you want to drop us an email, and by us, I mean John, the email address is podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. But until next time, that is it from us. Bye.
Bye.